Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey podcasters, Al Martin here. Welcome back to Making Data Simple. Hope everybody is healthy. We always like feedback. Please take a moment to give us feedback on the podcast, rate us wherever you may be, and always send an email to almartintalksdata@gmail.com. We listen. If you want to be on the podcast or you have different ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Today, I have a gentleman by the name of Nick Caldwell. He's the Chief Product Officer at Looker, or now Google. We'll talk about that in a bit. But he's spent 2 years at Reddit. He's spent 13 years at Microsoft. I see you as a pretty strong leader, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Nick, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks a ton. I really appreciate the invite, and looking forward to a fun discussion about data. Happy to be here with a fellow data nerd.
Yes, absolutely. You got the right person. So first of all, like I started the podcast, I got to say, you're healthy, everybody good, you're working at home, you're not breaking any rules, are you?
I'm doing the best I can. And, as a manager, it has been kind of a struggle to react. Like nothing could really prepare you for this exact situation. It's not really work from home. It's working from home amidst a crisis, try to figure out how to accommodate not just getting work done, but also the changes to mental health and the dynamics of people with children that they need to take care of. It's, stretched a lot of folks who are in management capacities to learn a lot really quickly while dealing with our own stuff. We have to remember that, we take care of our people before the product.
So, we were talking before we got on the podcast, we were kind of joking, which, I'm empathetic to, as always, anybody that may have health issues, but those that don't have health issues, we may go crazy from staying by ourselves, as long as we have. So any tips that you have for the listeners in terms of what you've learned?
For me, one, a lot of yoga. Two, I'm giving my wife a lot of space.
You're a smart man.
We got to get through this. We got to come out on the other side as one team. So
my theory on this is that 5-10 years, probably closer to 5, they're going to tell us how crazy we are, one way or another. I mean, and by that I mean on either side. In other words, it's either crazy that we didn't get out in front of this. They're going to do studies, or they're going to say that, hey, we went overboard. It's just, I don't think there's a win ultimately in how they're going to dissect this afterwards.
No, I mean, it's definitely going to be a situation where, hindsight is 20/20, of course. But I think there will be some lasting changes that I'm looking forward to. I think not trying to put a positive spin on the situation, but it is accelerating trends in technology that were happening anyway. So the move to remote work has been one of the biggest ones. And I think that things like people using Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams or so forth will persist. I think that the ability for people to have work from anywhere as a part of their company culture is something we needed for a very long time. And then on the health front, I'm seeing in places, people are really rethinking our approach to data as it pertains to health and being able to use that sort of information to protect our country and the people of the world. So you have to be an optimist and in these sorts of situations. And I think that we'll come out of it someday, hopefully soon.
Well, it's kind of like a war with an enemy you can't see. And usually out of wars, if there's anything that good comes about it, is a lot of innovation. Exactly. I'm with you on the privacy. That's going to be interesting. I don't know, something like 12 weeks ago, perfect timing, I guess. I took on a role as the vice president of data and AI expert labs, which is services. Mm-hmm. And that was before a pandemic hit. And when I first started, it was like, we couldn't log into VPNs. Hey, that was secure, et cetera. But we're starting to figure that out. Yeah. And we're able to work remotely pretty damn well. In fact, almost in 99% of all cases. But that wasn't the case when we started this.
And I was having conversations with IT leaders like even 3 months ago about them wanting to continue to own their own on-premise IT services. And I want to, continue running my own on-prem data stores. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine trying to run on-premise IT infrastructure at this exact moment in time? I think that we're going to see just a massive push toward infrastructure modernization. You're also starting to see, with examples of like Zoom or other companies who have had to adapt in terms of just unprecedented levels of traffic on their cloud services, you're starting to see just a validation that you can run extremely large scale businesses with stability in the cloud. And it's happening. This trend would have eventually come around to it, but now we're right there in front of us. This is forcing the modernization and adoption of new infrastructure and new approaches to work.
It is certainly accelerating and modernizing technology. It is polarizing too. It's like on one side there's panic, there's the herd mentality because we're all social. Everybody goes buy toilet paper, which I still cannot understand. It's like, there's this normalcy bias. I always think in terms of AI now, where we tend to think, oh, everything's fine. I mean, and this has happened over history. Like if you looked at the town of Pompeii, you probably know the ending. But first century AD, when, what was it, Mount Vesuvius? 2,000 people, they had time to get out, but they were watching. It hadn't really caused a problem for as long as we can remember. We're good. Tell me a little bit about your background. I want to get a sense of it.
Started my career in computing, building video games. Specifically, was fascinated with machine learning, AI, natural language. Fast forward several years, I ended up at Microsoft working on a natural language product called Info Navigator. Some people who are in the BI space might recognize this, but this was essentially a natural language interface for data. You could, talk to your business data sets. Hey, who's the top selling rep in Europe except for Mary and Sue? It'd give you back the answer in a form of a data visualization. That led me into my next big BI project, which was the founding team of Power BI. Power BI is Microsoft's entry into the business intelligence modernization space. And then my career took a bit of a turn from there. At this point, I'd been at Microsoft for about 15 years, and I decided to do something totally different and ended up going to Reddit as the VP of engineering, which was just a wild experience. If you don't know what Reddit is, it's a site where we try and monetize cat pictures. And it turns out to be one of the most...
Did it work? It seemed to have worked.
We're doing pretty well. We did pretty well. Is a site that is one of the largest data stores in the world. I think it's the fifth or sixth most traffic site in the world. And I learned so much there about modern approaches to data relative to what I had been doing at Microsoft. I learned lots of other things too, but this was a particularly valuable experience that I then took to my next role at Looker. Jumping back into the business intelligence space, Looker is also in the BI space, but it uses a very, very different approach that incorporates, I think, the best of what's current and bleeding edge and happening in data engineering, as well as offering kind of new sorts of data experiences that go beyond traditional BI dashboards. So I was at Looker for about a year and a half before we got acquired by Google. So now I'm a Googler. We're trying to figure out how to, take the company and integrate it into this much larger Google ecosystem. So lots of fun, exciting things happening for Looker right now.
That acquisition was fairly recent, was it not?
It just closed. So we've only officially been Googlers for, I think, about a month and a half. Just picked up our badge. I've only been in a Google building once just to pick up the badge, and then all the buildings have been closed due to coronavirus. But let's see, I think the initial announcement was sometime late last year.
So I want to get into a little bit of each of those areas, but before I do, I'm always intrigued, and it sounds like you have a relationship with data like me. I'm a data guy, but I'm also intrigued with leadership. And when I looked at your website, and you've got a lot of videos, even more so. I mean, I don't know if I saw one on data. It was more about leadership. Sounds like you're really into leadership. Is technology a necessary evil to get you towards leadership? Is that your passion?
No, I mean, I do love data. I've been working in space my whole life effectively. I think that the thing is, though, I'm an organizational leader at heart. Put another way, I'm a manager. So I think the best managers are ones who find ways to bring the best out of their employees, one, and then two, find a way to take that combination of unique skills and best apply it to some business need. A good manager is constantly trying to find the intersection between what the business needs and what would be, fulfilling and inspiring to their employees. I just, in my career, building organizations where that sort of process happens in a continuous cycle is actually what really makes me excited. but I've worked on a lot of products in my career. I think Looker is awesome. Reddit's awesome. But over time, what I've learned is that people matter much more than products in the long run. So I get my most enjoyment and most fulfillment out of that aspect of the work, figuring out how to build organizations that feel like people can get their best work done, that feel fulfilling, and of course accomplish something great from a product perspective.
Well, I think I know exactly what you mean, because a lot of times when I do presentations or otherwise, I start with my brand, and my brand is AI. And still early on in the onset of AI, but I would say, hey, look, I'm a data guy, I'm a client and people guy, and I think my brand's leadership. The first two I've earned. The last one you always continue and must, continually earn, right? You're never finished. And that's kind of the challenge. But so when I went out there, I looked at a few of your pitches, which were intriguing. And if you don't mind, I want to start there a little bit. We'll get back to data, but I'm intrigued by what you said. If you're okay with that.
No, go for it.
You had a couple topics: executive interviews, how leaders make new leaders, building trust with a product team, triple the team size without losing control. All interesting topics. And there were many more. Let me hit a couple of these. Like, you started off with the executive interviews. And I thought it was interesting because I did turn it on. First thing you jump into, you say, hey, you don't get jobs on LinkedIn. Yeah. That was like your first statement. And then you went in to talk about how important blogging and social is, which I totally agree. Would you mind talking a little bit about the executive interview topic, but also those topics as well?
That exec interview video was part of a series I put together for my nonprofit, which is called Color Code. The intent of that nonprofit is to try and get more people of color into technology and specifically into executive leadership positions. I've been in tech a long time, and just to be blunt, there are not a lot of other Black people in the C-suite.
Why is that? You've done the study. Awesome nonprofit. I had that as a question, but we'll start with that now too.
I wouldn't want to oversimplify an extremely complex problem, but one specific reason that video was intended to address is access to networks. When I say you don't get exec roles on LinkedIn, it means that if you're looking for an executive position like VP of engineering or VP of product or something of that nature, those sorts of opportunities tend to come to you via people that you know. If you're a person of color and you're operating a system where you may not have access to that sort of network or those sorts of people, then you have kind of an inherent disadvantage when it comes to getting into those roles. So the video is all about trying to break down that specific barrier, because it turns out for these types of roles, knowing a handful of people, particularly in the Bay Area, can give you access to all of those opportunities. The secondary aspect you asked about there, which was about your public brand and your public persona and so forth. This has to do, I think, with how I view people generating their own luck, for lack of a better word, right? If you have a brand for yourself, like you mentioned, leadership and so forth, if that becomes your public persona, you will increasingly find that opportunities will come to you, as opposed to you having to constantly hunt those opportunities out. Particularly for engineers, in our early careers, understand how much value you get in the long run from developing this sort of public persona. I know when I was a young engineer, I thought I could just code my way to solve any problem. And over time, I've come to appreciate that a lot goes into managing your career, managing your company, et cetera. It's much more complex. That part of the presentation was about telling people that a small investment in managing your public persona via blogging or active Twitter account or publishing your personal projects or any of these things, if you do it with regular enough rhythm and persistence, you will find that you over time develop a public brand, and having that public brand can lead you to opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise had access to. That's what the spirit and intent of that video was.
I thought it was good. I also like your advice, and I firmly believe in it, to blog frequently to promote that brand. I got a lot of people that I'm mentoring, and they say, look, I got nothing to blog about. I say, are you kidding me? What'd you do last week? Exactly. It's easy.
Yeah, I tell people it's like you'd be surprised. Like anything that you learn during the week, there's 100 or 1,000 people who would be interested in that. You may not realize it, but you can get very, very valuable content together simply by talking about your day or what you did or what you learned in the week or who you met. And over time, like if you do that enough, your personality, your skill set, that all of that stuff starts to emerge over time. But the key thing is you have to invest in it and do it with some regularity. I think that's where most people fall off. It's one of those things that's easy to talk about but hard to maintain. I don't have to tell you. I guess you're doing this podcast, right? So you probably know that a lot goes into keeping the rigor up.
Well, that's one reason, honestly, I did the podcast because, then it's every week. I've got to get it out every week. You can't let up. Once you let up, people are going to quit listening because you've got to be regular, right?
Exactly.
So I'm with you. I also think there's some sanity that you get from writing things down, doing these blog posts.
Oh, totally. One of the videos I have up is about, how I quickly drove some change within Looker's product organization. This is an extraordinarily complex body of work I had to do. And I was able to distill that down into a very crisp and clean presentation. So, the act of teaching other people also makes you a better leader. So it's a bit of a two-way street.
You're doing well, because one thing I also do when I'm mentoring is I Google the name of somebody and see if they come in the top of the list, and you do well. The problem I have is there's a lot of Al Martins out there. So I got a baseball player to compete with. I've got there's an evangelist or something. I don't know.
Oh, no. You're not going to beat the baseball player. That's too bad, man.
That's my goal. I've got to get above the baseball player. I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. Just a couple other topics that if you could expand upon would be great, like building trust with the product team, how leaders make new leaders.
Building trust with the product team was about an experience I had here at Looker when I first joined. And, I walked into a situation where the product organization did not have a predictable roadmap, right? And if you're running product and engineering, particularly for an enterprise company, it matters a lot that you be able to tell your customers, the field, and other stakeholders with some level of accuracy, within 3 months, for example, what's going to ship, and maybe 6 months out, with less accuracy, but you still have to have some sort of reliable, roadmap that you can use so that the field can talk to customers and so forth and so on. That presentation was about how to A, repair the relationship, and then B, build the sort of communication channels between product and the field that would be necessary to continue a healthy ongoing relationship. And maybe one of the best examples that I brought to bear there was one of the things we did at Looker in the first month was we created a field plus product forum where we would show up, and the only agenda on the meeting was to have people in the field just give us their concerns with product. I mean, just anything they wanted to complain about, just come in, tell us what the problems were. And we did that. We put people from sales, marketing, all over the place into a room, and then they just let them rail on us. And it was very painful. But one thing that came out of it was, it turns out if you bring all the people who are complaining about you into a room and have them do it at the same time, they start to feel bad for you, and it actually builds up empathy. So, and by a couple sessions of this, they were like, wow, Nick, I didn't realize you guys were dealing with all of these different stakeholders. And, the flames kind of died down a little bit, and we could start to have a more, kind of productive, well, let's work together and build a system that will allow us to work together going forward. Product organization, the field, we attend each other's offsites. It's a much healthier place to be. So I'm really proud of what we accomplished. The leaders make new leaders, another topic that I'm really passionate about. And it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. I really think the job of a great leader is to turn around, and once you've made it, figure out how to create new leaders. And that talk is about different frameworks and tools that I've picked up over the years to address that concern. And it comes down to eliminating fear, giving people opportunity, and then allowing them to fail in some sense if things don't work out. And I try and get really concrete and provide very specific managerial tools. I'll give one example just briefly, because I know you asked for only 2 minutes. One example is what I call the blue flame. The blue part of the fire is the hottest. what we're trying to do as managers is get the hottest output out of everyone who works for us. So the blue flame chart is, imagine a Venn diagram. On one side, it's all of the things that the business needs. It's all of the upcoming roadmap priorities. It's things that customers are asking for. It's the strategic direction from your boss, et cetera. On the other side of the Venn diagram is things that are intrinsic motivators to your employees. Technologies that they want to learn about, or people that they want to work with, or all the things that would make them super excited to come into work. And then the intersection of those two things is what I call the blue flame. So this is a tool that you can use as a manager during your discussions, your one-on-ones, to try and figure out, is every person in your organization in the optimal place to utilize their talents to meet whatever the business actually needs. So that's a fun video. I encourage you guys to check it out. It's got a couple other great tools and some stories in there about World War II. It's a good one.
That's great. Thank you. Going back, I know that when some of our listeners listen to part of what you said earlier, talking about having a roadmap, giving clients an expectation of what's going to be delivered, I guarantee inevitably somebody's out there going to say, oh, that's the waterfall model, and that you alleviated the concept of agile. Can you hit that real quick? Because I know that that's not true.
Yeah, I actually worked in a company that had the real waterfall model, and it's not that. So
yes.
Just briefly, like when I was at Microsoft for the first couple of years of my career, I used waterfall, and planning cycles during waterfall were literally a quarter long. You would plan for 3 months. That's not what I'm talking about. Right. A roadmap is something that can easily be attached onto any agile process. It's simply the idea that you can tell your customers with some relative predictability what is going to come down the pipe in the next, pick whatever period, but generally I never go longer than a year. Within 3 months needs to be fairly accurate. And in terms of how you incorporate that into any agile process, most teams who are using Kanban or Scrum are already doing the work required to cultivate a backlog, which would allow them some level of 3-month out predictability. And in terms of getting to the next 6 months, you can kind of work with your field and product people to essentially, like, as long as your backlog is prioritized, you can usually get the 3 to 6 month accuracy. Beyond that, you're really talking about strategy. There's folks who I think who run longer cycles, like longer shipping cycles, who might disagree with me.
That's what I think people get confused sometimes. You still have to have a roadmap. You still have to set expectations with the client community or ecosystem. And that still means you can, body agile, requirements can evolve, et cetera. The other thing on asking your clients, I'm 100% behind you there as well. I know Henry Ford said something like, if he would have asked people what they wanted, he would have had faster horses. But look, the best way to go and see and get the brutal truth is just have a candid discussion with your clients, and they'll tell you the cold, hard truth. And the interesting thing is, to your point, I agree, they do have some empathy after that, and they become your best clients.
Exactly. A little candor goes a long way, particularly in enterprise, like candor without ego. I think with Looker, one important approach we use is we have a definite opinion on our tool and where it sits in the market, but we're always cautious not to bash our competitors. I mean, everyone's got their own different approach to how they're going to solve these challenges associated with data and BI. And we try and just make sure that we're candid about what we're good at. We're candid about what we're not good at, but we keep the, ego out of the picture.
All right. So let's get back into the data. Are you a data guy? Do you consider yourself a data guy? I presume so, because you've been in data all your career, right? Like me.
I consider myself a data guy. It's always risky, though. I've been managing so long that I can sometimes get myself into trouble. But I've spent certainly most of my career working either in BI or machine learning. So
the cool thing is for me about data is I've always kind of been a data guy. Yes, I've been in machine learning. When I first started in data was not like it is today, though. It's like, hey, I often say it's like 2-phase commits for banks, ATM's boring. But now it's like the oil of the world. Everybody wants it. Everybody's using it. Everybody's trying to get it. Everybody's trying to steal it. It's finally the golden age of data. I've been waiting for this.
I was telling someone this morning that we're no longer in a world where you have to convince people that data matters. I remember 10 years ago trying to convince people that machine learning was important. Or if you think about it, like 10 years ago, I know this might blow people's mind, but like you didn't have growth teams. People would ask like, what's a data engineer? And today you've got like quantitative market. You have whole jobs who literally only exist because data has become such an important part of the fabric of a business. So like quantitative marketers and ops and revenue analysts, I mean, all of these things rely on trustworthy, effectively near real time, or even in some cases predictive data to get their jobs done in a way that didn't exist 10 years ago. It was like, if you could get a dashboard or a SQL query to consistently run, you'd be pretty happy. And nowadays, it's much more toward operational use cases of data that are really driving the business, which is amazing for data people. It means that we're coming down out of these ivory towers and finding real ways to get data into the hands of everyone within an organization in a way that helps them get their work done.
Well, it sounds like you have a ton of experience in both Red Hat and Microsoft around analytics, but let's start with Looker to make sure we hit that one hard. What is so unique about the way Looker looks at data?
Looker, in essence, is a platform for building data experience. A lot of our customers think we're a BI tool. We do have a great BI tool, but the better way to think about Looker is we allow you to connect to all of your corporate data sources, your stuff in a data lake, stuff in your SaaS applications, your relational data stores. We allow you to map all of that data into a semantic layer. And we have a technology called LookML, which allows you to do this. And then once you've constructed that.
Sorry to interrupt, but does LookML, is that essentially the new SQL?
It's like a easier to use version of SQL. It has all the power of SQL, but is a little bit easier to author. And it's tailored at allowing you to quickly create the sort of data sets you might expect from a BI workload. So quickly defining dimensions and key business metrics, et cetera, is much faster to do in the LookML language versus writing raw SQL or using other approaches. So it rapidly accelerates being able to get to those sort of business data sets.
I mean, why is it so different?
SQL is super powerful and can get really, really gnarly and complex, but it's also pervasive. So any data set you would want to talk to, be it your data lake or SaaS apps or whatever, is probably going to use SQL. So it's good that that's the gold standard. If you're trying to build, aggregate tables, or if you're trying to do particular types of, maybe I want to see period over period metrics or things like that, these are fairly common patterns that can be rapidly accelerated using a language like LookML. There's one other thing which I didn't quite get to, which also falls out of using this semantic layer approach versus doing raw SQL. So maybe I should get to that in a second. Essentially, a simpler interface for writing, potentially extremely complex SQL. The other thing that's important to know there is we put an API on top of all of this. A developer could use our API in lots of different ways, but they're essentially querying a data set, a set of filters, et cetera. And underneath the hood, Looker is taking the incoming data request, our understanding of the semantic layer, our understanding of where all of the data is living, the data lakes and all the other connectors, and we're figuring out the best possible queries to execute to pull that requested data set back, right? And that means that you can do some very interesting things. I don't know if you want to get into detail on this specific
Keep
aspect.
Keep going. I'm listening.
Okay, cool.
I'm a data guy. Remember that.
I'm trying to be careful. I don't want to, sometimes I could get real deep in the rat hole.
No,
so,
that's all right. That's all right.
So I'll just add one other thing here. And what this means that if you use LookML to map out all of your data sets in this way, and you use the APIs, you now have an API that has a governed layer to all of your business's data set. And you can do some really crazy things now. You can do some really cool stuff. One is business intelligence, of course. All right. So BI reports, dashboards, alerts, all of the stuff that you would traditionally see from a BI product is now possible. And with Looker, we've actually built a BI application on top of this API. But there's stuff you can do that's even more exciting. You can go beyond dashboards because, again, you now have an API that knows where all of your operational data stores are as well, not just the analytical stores. So you can start to build operational use cases, or what we call data experiences. So they could look like a BI dashboard, but they could also look like any sort of experience that you could imagine, where you're trying to build the best possible interface for an end user to accomplish some task with a business's data set. A couple quick examples might be factory floor worker, and you want to do a quick inventory lookup and a quick reorder. Like that is now all possible through APIs. Or you're a digital marketer and you're trying to manage the bids on particular keywords. Well, what used to be a very manual process, like downloading data from Facebook, Twitter ads platforms, merging them together and doing some analysis, that can now all be automated because you have an API that is connected to those data sources already, and not only is connected to them from a read perspective, but can also write back data. So you can now replace manual processes with operational business data-driven processes. One more step on the rat hole, because this is also really exciting for data engineers as well. The way Looker works, that semantic layer that I was just talking about, written in LookML, all of that code is checked into Git. So we're using software development practices and applying them to data engineering. So like think about your data as a product, or think about, the same way you would ship production code, think about taking those same sorts of software development lifecycle tactics and applying them to your data platform. So unit tests, integration tests, monitoring in production, all applied to this governed semantic layer. And what that means is, in the same way you can have hundreds or thousands of developers working on the same code base, you can now have hundreds or thousands of data engineers all working on the same semantic model across multiple departments. This unlocks incredible sorts of potential, like things that were never really possible with previous generations of BI tools become possible. We can now corral the growing chaos being introduced by all these proliferation of new SaaS applications entering the organization. We can take advantage of the fact that multiple departments are likely to have specific data experiences and specific data needs that will be unique to within their specific organizations. And we can do all of this while being assured that the underlying data remains governed, well-permissioned, trustworthy, so that the sales department is always seeing the same view of business metrics as the finance department, which is to this day like a very hard problem to solve. We now have come up with a new architecture which allows for this sort of consistency.
Is there any AI or machine learning built into the solutions you're talking about?
We're a platform for building experiences. So going back to the example I was talking about earlier, that digital marketing example, uses a machine learning algorithm that runs every 15 minutes to first pull down the performance of click-through rates on Facebook and Twitter ads, pulls that down, feeds it into a model, and then adjusts the bids, and then writes that data back into Facebook and Twitter to adjust the bids. The way that we look at it is the Looker API makes the data available, primarily for read cases, but also in some instances, write cases. And then you pump that into all sorts of different use cases.
This may be intuitive, but why Google? Why is Google such a great match?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I think I'll get the cultural one out of the way first. I mean, it turns out there's a lot of data nerds at Google, and there's a lot of data nerds at Looker. So there's an immediate cultural match. But from a product portfolio, there's two really interesting things. One is if you look at the GCP offerings, it's very clear that they had a gap in terms of their business intelligence offering. So a ton of great database, data transfer technologies, real-time stuff, but they didn't have a BI visualization or exploration layer. They also are extremely excited about this idea around the governed semantic model. So if we can figure out a way to have Looker's semantic layer show up in other GCP services, everything from being available to BigQuery so that, we can optimize for better cache performance, all the way up to maybe the semantic model shows up inside Google Sheets or something like that. But there's lots of places throughout the ecosystem where having this semantic layer will allow us to build really, really powerful products. So it's those two things.
Anything that we didn't say that you felt like, boy, I wish this question would have been asked, or I need to get out? I want to make sure that I don't leave any stone unturned here.
I think we talked a ton about Looker. I would, for folks who were interested in the earlier part of the conversation around equity, inclusion, and technology, I would encourage you to go to devcolor.org.
Yes.
I am a board member for DevColor. It is by far the best organization within, certainly the Bay Area doing amazing work to advance the careers of up-and-coming Black rock stars in technology. So please go check that out.
I would imagine, are there any podcasts, any more videos that you have there in terms of being able to advance your career?
Oh, yeah. I've got a ton of stuff on nickcaldwell.com. I try and post all of my educational videos there. And if you would like to check out things I've written, I have a lot on Medium as well. So
here's where we always like to end with a quick game just to get to know Nick, if you will. This one we're going to play is Would You Rather? It's based on your experience, and you got to pick one side or the other. It's not going to be easy, man.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Okay.
You should. It's not that tough. Microsoft or Reddit?
Oh, Reddit. That's easy.
See, but why is that? You got to give me one bullet. Just why.
Consumer products.
Consumer products. I like it. All right. East Coast or West Coast?
West Coast. Sunlight.
That's a good one, especially today. It was raining today here in Kansas City. All right, competition or co-opetition?
I am going to go with competition. I like to win.
Yeah, but earlier you said that, hey, it was really important to get your customers, you embrace your partners, so to speak, right? Even your enemies, so to speak.
You can be friendly, egoless, but still competitive.
All right, good one. Database decision or intuitive-based decision? That's an easy one, I think.
I am going to go with a data-informed decision. Is that an option?
Data-informed. That's database decision. I think that's good. That's
I'll go with that, yeah.
All right, AI or human decision?
I'm going to go with, for now, human decision. For 5 years from now, I'll put a question mark.
All right, very good. I'll go with that. They said privacy or freedom of speech.
I'm going to go with privacy on this one. I spent a lot of time at Reddit thinking about the value of freedom of speech. It's started as an open platform with a very, very strong ideal for freedom of speech. And I got to see lots of ways in which that unfortunately can lead to not seeing the best in people. I would bias more toward the first option.
Very good. You grew up on the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
Now your vote is West Coast?
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, there's lots of reasons.
You're not alienating your whole family with that, are you?
We've had this conversation many times, and they understand that I'm going to get them to move out here someday. But the East Coast, growing up on the East Coast is great preparation for coming to the West Coast because you can kind of take some of the harder edges that you develop on the East Coast and bring them over here, and you'll look like a superhero when it comes to making decisions. So I've taken advantage of that. But on the West Coast, you've got amazing technology companies, amazing, cities like San Francisco, LA, amazing sunlight. In the long run, I think the more relaxed way of life.
Good answer. And yes, the sun is always helpful. It brightens your day.
Exactly.
Pun intended. Hey, thank you, Nick, for being on. You're extremely knowledgeable. I could go on forever chatting with a data guy. And look, I really will try to get you back on if you're available because there's so many things that we didn't even get into. People don't realize how difficult it is to do a podcast because once you get here, you try to keep it in snippets that it's not a full day thing. But then you get into a conversation with somebody as knowledgeable as yourself, and it's so hard to... There's so many other questions that just didn't get answered. So
I totally appreciate that. And yeah, I will happily come back. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks a ton.
Hey, thank you so much. And for you podcast listeners, thanks as always. We'd love to hear from you. almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Till next time, I'll see you on the podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Making Data Simple podcast, where we make data fun. Be sure to visit ibmbigdatahub.com/podcast to access the show notes and uncover even more great episodes. Remember, the views expressed here are those of the host and its guests, and do not necessarily represent the views of IBM. Until next time, let's go. Over and out.